So, what happens when the world breaks? Well, its art breaks right along with it. Today, we're going to dive into how artists of the 20th century tried to pick up the pieces after everything fell apart. And trust me, this isn't just about weird paintings. It's really a map of how the human mind tried to make sense of a world that, well, just didn't make sense anymore. Okay, let's start with this quote. I know, it's bizarre, right? A sewing machine and an umbrella on a dissecting table. It's from a poet way back in the 19th century, but it became this huge rallying cry for artists after World War I. See, they believed that in a world that had been totally broken by logic, the only path to a new kind of truth was to just smash random things together and see what happened, to find beauty in the absurd. So, what was the core problem they were trying to solve? In a word, World War I. The sheer mechanized slaughter of the trenches just made a mockery of Western civilization's claim to be rational. Think about it. The very same logic that built amazing empires and industries had also created an unbelievably efficient death machine. For artists, this wasn't just a tragedy, it was a complete crisis of meaning. Which brings us to the big question that's going to drive this whole explainer. When the world stops making sense, what on earth is art supposed to do? What should it even look like? We're about to look at three really different, really radical answers to that exact question. All right, let's get into our first response, surrealism. The thinking here was pretty straightforward. If the outside world, the world of logic and reason, is a complete and utter nightmare, then maybe the only place to find any kind of real, authentic truth is to look inward, to dive deep into the world of dreams and the unconscious mind. And here we have it, the mission statement of surrealism, straight from the source. The goal was something called psychic automaticism. It's a fancy term, but the idea is simple. Find a way to let your unconscious mind speak directly, without your rational brain getting in the way to censor it. The goal was to find truth in pure, unfiltered, and, often totally absurd thought. Now, they had two main ways of doing this. The first was just letting go. Absolute automatism. Think automatic drawing, where you just let your hand move across the page without any conscious plan. But the second path, which artists like Salvador Dali perfected, was almost the exact opposite. It was about using incredible, hyper-realistic skill to paint completely illogical dreamscapes that felt disturbingly real. And this is how they built a whole new visual language, a language of dreams. You see, melting clocks? That's not just a quirky image. It's a full-on assault on our rigid, rational concept of time. Burning giraffes, a person with drawers pulling out of their body. All these bizarre, absurd images were meant to peel back the curtain and show us that the reality we see every day is just this thin, fragile layer over something much weirder and much more fluid underneath. But hey, not everyone thought the answer was to retreat into the mind. Our second response, the avant-garde, was all about fighting back. They weren't interested in healing the individual psyche. They wanted to grab society by the collar, shock it, provoke it, and hopefully force some kind of radical change. This quote just nails the whole spirit of the avant-garde, doesn't it? For centuries, art was basically seen as a passive mirror, just reflecting the world. The avant-garde saw it as a weapon, a hammer you could use to smash conventions and build a totally new reality. The whole point was to be aggressive, to jolt a sleepy public awake. It all really kicked off with movements like Cubism. You had artists like Picasso and Braque who just shattered the 500-year-old tradition of single-point perspective. By showing you an object from a bunch of different angles all at once, they were making a pretty profound point. Reality isn't stable. It's fragmented. And how we see it is constantly changing. And then things got even more intense with the futurists over in Italy. These guys were obsessed with the noise, the violence, the raw energy of the new machine age. They actually literally called for the destruction of museums, calling them cemeteries of art, because they wanted to just erase the past and build this new future totally dedicated to speed and technology. And finally, you get Dadaism, which was maybe the most direct response to the sheer absurdity of the war. Their logic was kind of perfect in a way. If a perfectly rational world leads to a world war, then the only sane response is total, absolute nonsense. They created what they called anti-art, like putting a signed urinal in a gallery, to basically say that in a world that's absurd, the very idea of art has become meaningless. So all of this chaos and rebellion eventually leads us to our third and final response, postmodernism. And this one is different. It didn't just offer up a new answer to the question of what art should do, it started to question the very idea that there could be one single true answer in the first place. You see, for all their rebelliousness, those earlier movements were still part of something we call modernism. They still believed they could find a new truth, a better way forward. But then came the Holocaust. Then came the atomic bomb. And after that optimism just died. The whole grand project of progress leading to some kind of utopia, it didn't just seem broken. It looked like a catastrophic lie. This table here breaks down the shift perfectly. Modernism was dead serious. It was on a quest for a universal, objective truth, and it treated the artist like some kind of original genius. Postmodernism, on the other hand, is ironic, it's playful. It suggests that truth is subjective, that it's constructed. And the artist, they're no longer a lone genius, they're more like a DJ, a remixer of all the culture that's already out there. It's a huge shift from one big story that explains everything to a bunch of small, competing stories. And this led to some really wild ideas, like the simulacrum. The theory goes that in our world, which is just saturated with media and advertising, the copy of a thing, the simulation, has actually become more real and more important to us than the original thing itself. Just think about it. Curated Instagram lives, brand logos that feel more valuable than the actual product. The simulation has kind of taken over. And artists like Andy Warhol just dove headfirst into this. By screen printing a Campbell's soup can and calling it art, he was making a radical statement. He was basically saying, look, in a consumer culture, everything is a product, even art. He just erased the line between a gallery and a supermarket, suggesting the artist isn't some genius creator, but more of a curator of the stuff around us. So, after all this chaos, this nonsense, this irony, why should any of it matter to us today? Why should we care about these weird, absurd art movements from nearly 100 years ago? Well, because the problems they were wrestling with, they never really went away. The thing is, these movements aren't just dusty chapters in an art history textbook. They're toolkits. Seriously, Surrealism gave us a language to understand our own subconscious desires. The Avant-Garde gave us a blueprint for how to challenge the status quo. And Postmodernism, it gave us the critical tools we absolutely need to decode the hyper-real, media-drenched world we are all living in right this second. And that kind of leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. Maybe these artists weren't just reacting to an absurd world. Maybe they were actually showing us the way through it. In our own world of deepfakes and memes and constant digital remixes, maybe embracing absurdity isn't about escaping from reality. Maybe, just maybe, it's the most honest way we have left to actually see it.